At my son's housewarming gala in his brand new $4 million mansion, he grabbed the quilt my dying wife had sewn by hand and threw it into the fireplace. That ratty old blanket doesn't belong in this house. My 8-year-old grandson stood there watching his grandmother's last gift burn. For a moment, nobody moved. The laughter died. The clinking champagne glasses stopped. Even the musicians in the corner seemed to lose their rhythm. I stood frozen in the middle of a living room that looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than a family home. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked acres of perfectly landscaped property. Everything in that house screamed wealth. Everything except the quilt. My name is Walter Brannigan. I'm 71 years old, a retired carpenter from Fort Worth, Texas. For more than 4 decades, I built homes with my hands, but nothing I ever built made me prouder than my family. At least that's what I used to believe. The quilt in my hands wasn't just fabric and thread. My wife, Dorothy, had spent nearly 6 months making it during the final year of her life. Even while cancer drained her strength, she sat beside the living room window stitching every square by hand. Every star, every seam, every thread. All for our grandson Noah, the boy she adored more than anything. "Grandpa, is that Grandma's quilt?" Noah asked, his eyes lighting up as he ran across the room. I smiled. "Sure is, buddy. She wanted you to have it." Before Noah could reach it, Claire stepped between us. My daughter-in-law's smile looked polite, but her eyes said otherwise. "Oh, sweetheart, that's old. We have much nicer things upstairs. But Grandma made it for me." The disappointment in Noah's voice hit me harder than it should have. Then James walked over. My son, the successful surgeon, the owner of this mansion, the boy Dorothy and I sacrificed everything to raise. His expression tightened the second he saw the quilt. "Dad, this really isn't the place. Your mother wanted Noah to have it." James sighed as if I were embarrassing him. "Mom's been gone for 2 years. The room grew quiet. Several guests pretended not to listen. Others watched openly. "You can't keep dragging the past into everything," James continued. "This isn't about the past." "It is." Then, without another word, he snatched the quilt from my hands. Everything happened so fast. 3 steps, 1 motion, 1 decision. He opened the fireplace screen and tossed Dorothy's quilt directly into the flames. The fire caught immediately. Orange tongues curled around the fabric. Black smoke rose toward the chimney, and 40 years of my wife's love began disappearing before my eyes. "No!" Noah's scream echoed through the room. Tears instantly filled his eyes. "Daddy, stop! Grandma made that for me!" James didn't even look at him. Instead, he turned back toward his guests and forced a laugh. Kids get attached to the strangest things. A few people chuckled nervously. Most looked away. Nobody said a word. I felt something break inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet crack. The kind that happens when someone finally destroys the last piece of what you thought they still were. I walked to the fireplace, opened the screen, and reached into the flames with my bare hands. The heat tore into my skin. Pain shot through my fingers, but I didn't stop, because some things are worth getting burned for. And Dorothy's final gift to Noah was one of them. I pulled the quilt free and dropped it onto the marble floor, smothering the flames with my hands. The edges were scorched. One corner was blackened, but most of it survived, just like Dorothy always did. If you've ever watched someone you love be treated like they never mattered, subscribe, because some stories deserve to be heard. I looked down at the damaged quilt. Then I looked at my son. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had absolutely no idea who he had become. What I didn't know was that buried inside that quilt was a secret Dorothy had protected for more than 35 years. A secret that would change Noah's life forever. And destroy everything James thought he owned. The next morning, I placed Dorothy's quilt across our kitchen table. The smell of smoke still clung to the fabric. So did the memory of Noah's tears. For hours, I studied every inch of it. Something felt different, heavier. Certain sections seemed thicker than they should have been. At first, I told myself grief was making me imagine things. But then I remembered something Dorothy had said shortly before she died. Make sure Noah gets the quilt himself. Not through James, not through anyone else, directly. At the time, I thought it was simply a grandmother's wish. Now I wasn't so sure. That afternoon, I drove to Maggie Chen's quilting shop. Maggie and Dorothy had been friends for nearly 20 years. If anyone could understand Dorothy's stitching, it was Maggie. The moment she saw the quilt, her expression changed. She carefully spread it across a large work table and began examining the seams. For several minutes she didn't speak. Then she stopped. Her fingers froze over the center star. "Walter?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "This isn't normal batting." A knot formed in my stomach. Maggie carefully opened a hidden seam. She reached inside and pulled out a sealed plastic sleeve. My heart nearly stopped. Inside were documents, dozens of them. Property records, legal papers, trust agreements, land deeds. The more we uncovered, the more unbelievable the story became. For over 30 years, Dorothy had quietly purchased small pieces of land outside Austin. 5 acres here, 10 acres there. Whenever she worked extra shifts as a nurse, she invested the money. Whenever others spent on luxuries, she bought another piece. Year after year, decade after decade, patiently, silently. By the time she passed away, those scattered parcels had become hundreds of acres, and thanks to Austin's explosive growth, they were now worth more than $30 million. I sat there speechless. The woman I'd shared 40 years with had built a fortune without telling anyone. Not for herself, not for James, for Noah. Then Maggie found something else. A letter, written in Dorothy's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was addressed to Noah. Every word felt like Dorothy was sitting beside me. She explained how she had built the land portfolio piece by piece throughout James's entire life. She explained why she kept it secret. And then came the sentence that hit hardest. "If your father values this quilt, he remembers what matters." I stopped reading. My throat tightened, because I already knew the next line. "If he throws it away, then you'll need this inheritance more than I ever imagined." Dorothy knew. Somehow, years before any of us admitted it, she saw what James was becoming. She saw the arrogance, the greed, the obsession with status, and she prepared for it. For a long time, neither Maggie nor I spoke. Finally, she looked at me. "James has no idea, does he?" I shook my head. "No." "Good." But keeping the secret became impossible only a few days later. Because the deeper we investigated, the uglier things became. An attorney helped review the trust. Everything was airtight. The land belonged solely to Noah. No loopholes, no shortcuts, no way for James to legally touch it. But while reviewing public records, another discovery surfaced. James wasn't nearly as wealthy as he pretended. Despite his enormous income, he was drowning in debt. The mansion, the luxury cars, the lifestyle. Most of it was financed. And there were rumors of something even worse. A malpractice investigation, a possible lawsuit. The perfect image he'd spent years building was beginning to crack. Then another piece of information surfaced. And this one chilled me. James had recently been making plans to leave the country. Not alone, with Noah. At first I couldn't believe it. But evidence kept appearing. Financial transfers, travel arrangements, conversations that didn't make sense. The picture became clearer every day. James wasn't trying to build a future. He was trying to escape consequences. And somewhere along the way, he'd started viewing his own son as an asset instead of a child. That realization hurt more than watching the quilt burn. Because a blanket can be repaired, a little boy's heart is harder to fix. If you've ever seen someone use power against the people who love them most, subscribe. Because some truths need witnesses. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat alone in the yellow kitchen. Dorothy's letter rested beside me. The quilt lay folded on the table. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. For the first time, I fully understood what my wife had spent decades preparing for. She wasn't protecting money. She was protecting Noah. And deep down I knew something else. The moment James learned what was hidden inside that quilt, a family war was going to begin. The confrontation came faster than anyone expected. As soon as James learned about the trust, he made his move. He tried to challenge my authority as trustee. He claimed I was too old, too emotional, too unstable to manage Noah's inheritance. But this time his money couldn't protect him. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimony, documents showing his mounting debt, and desperate attempts to secure control over Noah's future. When the court reviewed everything, the truth became impossible to ignore. James wasn't acting in Noah's best interest. He was acting in his own. The judge denied every request he made. Then came the ruling that changed everything. Temporary custody of Noah was granted to me. I still remember the moment Noah ran across the hallway and threw his arms around me. For the first time in a long time, he looked safe, not scared, not anxious, just a little boy who finally felt protected. We drove home together that evening. Back to the yellow kitchen Dorothy loved. Back to the workshop where I planned to teach him everything I knew. And most importantly, back to the quilt. That night, I tucked him into bed beneath the stars Dorothy had sewn by hand. "Grandpa," he whispered. "Yeah, buddy? This is the best thing I own." I smiled. "Because it's worth millions?" He shook his head. "No, because Grandma made it with love. If you've ever learned that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, subscribe. Because stories like this remind us what truly matters." A few months later, Noah was laughing again, sleeping through the night, drawing pictures without fear of criticism, healing, and every evening before turning out the light, he wrapped himself in Dorothy's quilt, a quilt that carried far more than an inheritance. It carried a grandmother's love. And in the end, that was the greatest gift she could have left behind.